The Palestinian people honor us with their application to become full members of the United Nations. Kenya was proud to vote for today's historic resolution enabling additional rights and privileges to the state of Palestine and to urge the Security Council to reconsider this application as soon as possible. For decades, we have supported the right of the Palestinian people to self-determination. After all, our very identity as a free people, as an independent state, was forged from self-determination. When the United Nations was created in 1945, we were a colonial territory in which formerly free nations were under the brutal yoke of an imperial power. It was our struggle for independence as African nationalists, joined with other worldwide struggles, that won us independent Kenya. We cannot deny others who legitimately seek self-determination any more than we can deny our very being as a nation. The Palestinian people aspire for all facets of their governance to be sovereign and peace-loving, and to be reflected in a state that embraces the obligations of full membership, as demanded by Article 4 of the UN Charter. However, in the embattled Gaza and the increasingly troubled West Bank, the elusive grace of peace is a distant dream. The brutalities of the October 7th Hamas assault on Israel, which claimed over 1,200 lives and led to the abduction of 240 civilians and soldiers, stands as a grievous chapter in the annals of conflict. This act of terror, which Kenya sternly and unequivocally condemns, is a stark violation of the sanctity of life and peace. Terrorism, irrespective of its professed justifications, is a scourge that erodes the pursuit of negotiation, inquiry, mediation, conciliation, arbitration, judicial settlement, resort to regional arrangements, or other peaceful means that we have embraced as members of the United Nations. Following the devastating assault by Hamas, Israel's justified military response has had immense ethical, legal, and humanitarian consequences. Sadly, the scale and intensity of the military operations in Gaza have led to severe humanitarian harms, with multiple reports indicating that many of the casualties are non-combatants, with a distressing number being children. The logistical restrictions imposed on Gaza by Israel have severely limited access to essential services and goods for the non-combatant population. The impact on non-combatants, on critical civilian objects, and on humanitarian workers, including those working for the United Nations, have frequently deviated from international law and international humanitarian law. Mr. President, over the years, Kenya has consistently backed multiple resolutions that advocate for Palestinian statehood and self-determination. Our commitment is firmly held, reflecting our belief that full membership in the UN is foundational to any state's sovereignty and equality. We therefore urge a united Security Council to play its role in supporting the conditions for the secure and peaceful existence of Palestinian independence. These efforts must begin with an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza, the unconditional release of all hostages, followed by a resumption of dialogue without preconditions, aimed at realistically achieving the two-state solution. This approach is not merely a pathway to peace, but a strategic necessity that addresses the core aspirations of both Israelis and Palestinians. We urge all states, leaders, and organizations with influence on Israeli and Palestinian leadership to make every effort to encourage and facilitate a ceasefire and the resumption of dialogue. This is the only way to marginalize extremists who find relevance and agency in violence. It would empower leaders who understand that the peace their people deserve can only come from recognizing the peace that the opposite side also deserves. Kenya has experienced the devastating loss and outrage following terrorist attacks on our citizens. We fully empathize with Israel's security concerns. However, we also recognize that counterterrorism with no limits makes future acts of terror almost inevitable. We condemn all military actions by Israel that are at odds with international law and international humanitarian law that have been undertaken in the past and all that will follow. We therefore, in this vein, strongly urge Israel to refrain from an assault on Rafah, where a large number of displaced non-combatant civilians have sought refuge, as such an action could risk atrocities and crimes against humanity due to the inevitable significant civilian casualties and immense humanitarian repercussions. Meanwhile, Hamas's continued holding of hostages is not only a violation of international law, but also a gross act of cruelty that demonstrates their disregard for human life. Hamas must release all hostages immediately and relinquish its claims to political and administrative leadership. Its reign of terror must end to pave the way for leaders who genuinely seek negotiation, dialogue, and reconciliation as part of a process leading to the Palestinian people's self-determination and statehood. A peace-loving state of Palestine cannot include an organization committed to the destruction of a people who murder civilians and oppress their own in the name of a cause. We recognize the Palestinian Authority as the rightful representative of the people of Palestine. As we look to the future, we hope to pave the way for the next resolution on Palestine's full UN membership to reflect not just hope, but real progress towards lasting peace and mutual respect. Mr. President, as I close, we are at a fork in the road. This organization was created by the most powerful in 1945 with a promise to those most oppressed and vulnerable. We must decide whether the dictates of those with the most power will define our way forward. That way will lead to a dangerous, deadly, dignity-killing multipolarity. We must stand together for the Charter and resist its shredding as our key defense for a world in which the most powerful are impelled to lawful conduct. This vote for Palestine is a vote for the promise of the United Nations,